Earth, the third planet from our Sun, the only confirmed source of life in the entire universe. It is home to trillions of living organisms, and among them some 7 billion humans. With everyone hurrying along their relatively busy lives, it's quite easy to forget about what may very well be the most important life forms to have ever come into existence: plants. Now, what exactly are plants? What do they even do? Unless you've recently completed a high school level or higher biology course or study plants for a living, you probably tend to see them as those sedentary green things that shoot out of the ground. But, in actuality, they are much more than that. In fact, the origin of plants, land plants to be specific, is quite fascinating. Now, look closely at this water. I mean, really, really closely. Do you see anything? Anything that just might have led to the evolution of land plants? Perhaps some algae or other organisms?
Yes, I do believe I see something.
Of course you can't! These organisms are microscopic! With the exception of seaweeds, but obviously there are none of those in this water, are there? In order to see the microscopic unicellular organisms in this sample, we'll need to use a microscope.
Quick, to the laboratory. We haven't one moment to lose.
After analyzing our sample of water, we have isolated a few of the organisms living in it. The organism here is the green algae, Charophycean, ancestor to the staggering number of more than 280,000 species of plants that inhabit the Earth today. Now that we have explored how plants came to be, you're probably thinking, all this information is really quite interesting, but how does it matter to me? Well, let me tell you, it's very important to you. We all know that most animals need oxygen to carry out cellular respiration. You know, that process by which carbon compounds are broken down along with oxygen to form water and carbon dioxide and produce anywhere from 30 to 38 molecules of ATP, which provide energy for basic metabolic processes. With so many organisms performing this process continuously, there has to be a constant supply of these organic compounds and oxygen. Both are produced by photosynthesis. This here is a plant in the middle of performing photosynthesis. And this is the closest we dare approach, for fear of interrupting this process absolutely essential to life here on Earth. One important thing to notice is that there are green leaves. These are the main sites of photosynthesis, and their flat shape allows them to fill this role perfectly. In this leaf are many cells, and in these cells are chloroplasts. And in these chloroplasts are thylakoids, and on these thylakoids are little structures that we'll call photosystem towns. These towns consist of many identical green-colored houses called chlorophyll molecules, each home to several tiny particles called electrons. One day, Photosystem 2 Town receives a visitor of extraterrestrial origin. After voyaging 150 million kilometers from the Sun to Earth, a photon of light ends its journey at a single molecule of chlorophyll. Upon hearing news of this recent arrival, an electron becomes excited. As word passes, other electrons excite until finally an electron mayor jumps out of excitement from his double-sized mayor house up into City Hall. For he knows that the visit is a signal for the activation of the H+ transporters. As the mayor runs from his town to Photosystem 1 town, his presence is noted by the H+ portal operators along the way, and hydrogen ions are transported across the county line and dumped into a river which flows through the county and emerges in Stroma County. At this second border, hydrogen ions flow past, allowing turbines conveniently situated on the river to generate energy and store it in the form of ATP. An H2O bus drives into town, and two of its passenger electrons see a vacancy in the mayor's house and decide to fill it. Immediately after their departure from the bus, the water is split and oxygen is returned to the air. Shortly afterwards, the mayor arrives at Photosystem 1 town, and not a moment too soon, not only because he has lost much of his energy running between the two towns, but also because the mayor of Photosystem 1 town has been so excited by other photons that he chooses to leave the very electrons who elected him in the first place. The mayor of Photosystem 2 town takes his place, so the deserter is free to travel. As the former Photosystem 1 mayor departs, he tells two fellow electrons to hop onto an NADP+ truck to make NADPH and ship it to the sugar factory. Soon after, the workers at the Calvin County Sugar Factory put to use their newest shipment of NADPH to build up the necessary supplies of the various carbon compounds for their greatest collaborative achievement yet: the production of a fruit. Literally, the fruit of their labor. As we leave this obscure extended metaphor, let's take a look at a fruit itself. It is important to note that fruit are only present in angiosperms, or flower-bearing plants. When an angiosperm is ready to pass on its genes to further generations, it will generate a flower, which can then be fertilized by a grain of pollen. This pollen grain lands on the stigma of the carpel, and from it, a tube cell grows, through which two sperm cells can travel to an ovule in the ovary. Here, a process called double fertilization occurs, in which one sperm fertilizes the egg to form the embryo, while the other joins with the central cell and forms the endosperm, a food supply for the generation to come. Together, the embryo and endosperm join with a seed coat to create a suit of armor that protects the young offspring temporarily from the dangers of the world. In addition, the flower's ovary also develops into an extra layer of protection, as well as a means of dispersal, beneficial not only to the plants, but also to the animals that aid in their dispersal. From ingesting edible fruits, an animal can gain a tasty snack and a variety of nutrients that improve its health. So we've just discussed fruit, one of the most obvious foods provided by plants. But in addition to this, a lot of other parts of many plants can also be used as food. Plants are the ultimate primary producer, harnessing more solar energy than any other thing on Earth. With the products of photosynthesis, a plant builds up its own mass and grows. Then, something like a cow, a primary consumer, comes along and eats the plant. Now, much of this biomass either is used up by the cow to perform basic metabolic processes, or is released as heat. In the end, only about 10% of the total grass biomass goes towards the cow's growth. As the cow munches away on grass and grows, we humans think of them as a source of food. So when the cow has obtained enough biomass to be worth killing and processing, it is killed, processed, and sold to us as meat. Well, most of us at least. As we move away from this slightly barbaric topic, we will discuss the way in which some animals utilize plants to create a shelter for themselves, such as a beaver's dam or a bird's nest. Here we see the nest of a hummingbird. Small, but crafted perfectly to fit the size requirements of this tiny being and its eggs. And here, we catch a bird leaving its nest to retrieve small twigs to cushion the future eggs. Finally, a red-tailed hawk and its massive nest are seen atop of a sycamore tree native to California. Besides being used as the building blocks of some animals' houses, plants are also used as powerful components in decoration and landscaping. Now take a look at this section of grass. Clearly, one side is much longer than the other. I don't know about you, but I don't think that grass could possibly grow this uniformly naturally. Obviously, it has been touched by the hand of man, made to grow like this so that residents of this particular apartment community can have satisfaction in the polished diversity of grass length on the land. A little further along, we come across this interesting boundary between these two distinctly different plant species. Again, plants do not naturally grow like this, and the separation is simply the work of man on this environment, perhaps as a result of two gardeners clashing opinions on plants or divided ownership of this portion of land. Anyway, the ways in which these plants grow has clearly been altered by whoever was hired to do so. Another thing that you might have noticed is the distinct difference between plants in the wilderness and plants that have been cultivated around civilization. This obviously is also the work of mankind. I mean, think about it. There's almost no way anyone living in a city like Irvine would enjoy looking at the bushes we see out in the wild. Instead, people tend to like to wake up in the morning, look out their window, and see broad, flat green leaves, tall, evenly spaced trees, and large flowers of every color of the rainbow. The problem with all this is that many of these non-native plants require much more water than what can naturally be found in this area. This means that the developers of this land not only planted these plants here, but also set up a system of pipes to deliver one of the reactants necessary to photosynthesis: water.
Interestingly, if we go back to what we once thought was the wilderness, we find some patches devoid of plant life, clearly intended to provide easy access to the system of pipes and sprinklers that has been implemented in the area. So obviously, the government is spending quite a bit of energy and resources to maintain the growth of these native plants. But what's the entire point? The only other people we've encountered on this path have been bikers, joggers, dog walkers, people merely using the surrounding oxygen without a thought for its source. At this particular, well-traveled intersection, we find a sign most likely established to provide information about the surrounding wilderness. However, it's quite clear it has fallen into disrepair. Its surface is alarmingly blank, its brochure container curiously neglected and empty. In fact, the only real information we could find was printed on a single sheet of paper stapled to the back of the sign, warning anyone who may stumble upon it about respecting rattlesnakes. But what about the plants? So, by now you're probably wondering, how can all of this be fixed? Well, it all starts with people like you. Whether you're studying biology, teaching biology, or just watching this video for the heck of it, you've demonstrated some clear interest in plants. The next step is to spread the word. Tell your friends, your family, strangers even, about the wonders of plants. Perhaps you could even show them this video. In doing so, you'd be spreading our message all around the world, educating people about the brilliance of our plant Earth.